The X Zone Radio Show is heard on radio broadcast affiliates worldwide, including
AM 580 CFRA in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada.
WPUL AM 1590 in Daytona Beach, Florida.
KOHI AM 1610 in St. Helens, Oregon.
KHRO AM 1150 in El Paso, Texas. And for more information on becoming a professional broadcast affiliate of the X Zone Radio Show, visit
www.xzbn.net
or call toll-free worldwide
1-800-610-7035.
The X Zone radio and TV show is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone radio and TV show or in any manner endorsed by Rob McConnell, REL-MAR McConnell Media Company, Talkstar Radio Network, its affiliated stations, or employees.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
I know you've deceived me, now here's a surprise. I know that you have, 'cause there's magic in my eyes. I can see for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. Oh yeah. If you think that I don't...
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Talkstar Radio Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, UK High Definition Radio, Euro High Definition Radio, and Star Cable. Toll-free worldwide, 1-800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. This hour, X Zone Nation, Skip Atwater is our special guest. He is the research director at the Monroe Institute. Skip was guided from within to a career as a counter-spy during the Cold War era, where he used his natural psychic aptitude as a U.S. Army counterintelligence special agent. He played a key role in the remote viewing intelligence program, now known to the world by the code name Stargate. For 10 years, Skip was the operations and training officer for this secret remote viewing program. He recruited and trained an elite cadre of professional intelligence officers to do remote viewing for the Department of Defense and various members of the national intelligence community. He planned, conducted, and reported thousands of remote viewing intelligence collection missions. Working in the Bob Monroe Research Lab, he has explored the realms of his own consciousness and adopted a spiritual perspective of everyday life. In his role as research director, he published technical research on methods for expanding consciousness, authored the inspirational book Captain of My Ship, Master of My Soul, which is now available as an ebook, and assisted hundreds of individuals in experiencing and exploring expanded states of consciousness. Joining me now from the Monroe Institute is Skip Atwater. Skip, welcome to the X Zone.
Thank you very much, Rob. Nice to be here.
It's great having you with us, Skip. Could you give our listeners what the basic definition of remote viewing is?
Well, there are several ways to answer that question. We think of it as a mental means to describe locations, activities that are distant from you, blocked by distance, whether that distance be in time or in space. A more refined definition is that it's a very protocol-driven, scientifically based procedure. It is not waking up from a prophetic dream or having some sort of vision. It's a very controlled type of use of psychic perception.
Skip, you and I have to take a commercial break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Exonation Skip Atwater is our very special guest. He is the research director at the Monroe Institute. And his website, and the website for the Monroe Institute, is www.monroeinstitute.org. That's www.monroeinstitute.org. The X Zone is a place where people dare to believe, dare to be heard, Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern. And you can always listen to us if you've missed the show by going to www.xzonepodcast.com. And for more information on the TV series Paragators, visit the website www.paragators.org. Skip Atwater and I will return on the other side of this break as we continue from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
I'm looking through you. Where did you go? I thought I knew you. What did I know? You don't look different, but you have changed. I'm looking through you. You're not the same. Your lips are moving. I cannot hear. Your voice is soothing, but the words aren't clear.
Skip Atwater is our special guest. He is the research director at the Monroe Institute. Their website is www.monroeinstitute.org. Skip, when was the decision made, and who made the decision that the U.S. Army and other intelligence agencies, I should have said the Department of Defense and other members of the national intelligence community, were going to use remote viewing?
I think that there is not one exact date that began, but a series of events that happened over a period of time. If we look back in the very early 1970s, apparently the CIA was providing intelligence collection requirements. They used to call them ICRs, intelligence collection requirements, to a widespread intelligence effort to find out if there was anybody which was in then the Soviet bloc countries, behind the Iron Curtain, as we used to say, or any other places in the world that were investigating paranormal phenomena, and developed several leads, several reports pertaining to money being spent and high-level scientists investigating things. And that led to approaching a research organization known as Stanford Research Institute, or SRI International as it's now called, and finding a man by the name of Dr. Puthoff, who had stumbled across some research that he was interested in with Ingo Swann. And in 1972, then, he worked with Ingo Swann, a remote viewer, to do several experiments, and published those reports in the Journal for Electrical Engineers, which is the IEEE journal. When the CIA got word of this, they approached Dr. Puthoff and said, "Boy, have we been looking for you." And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, we have these reports from these foreign research organizations that are studying paranormal activity, and we would like you to replicate some of the experiences, some of the experiments that they're doing to see whether or not the results they're producing are true, or is this some sort of false propaganda or false intelligence." So SRI was originally under contract in the very early 1970s to replicate the work being done at foreign locations that had been detected by the CIA.
How would the CIA actually get their hands on the information of the experiment that could be replicated?
Well, they use a multidisciplinary intelligence approach. You hire a janitor who works in the building, and you watch the cash flow through the banks and find out what professors from what universities are going to work in what laboratories. A very intricate, multi-source picture emerges as to what's going on in that building and who's working there, how much work is being done, what are people talking about in the coffee shop, and so forth, and then attempting to replicate that activity.
What were some of the experiments that were repeated on this side of the Iron Curtain?
The idea of being able, again, to describe things at a distance, what in a more occult expression might be clairvoyance. There was some attempt at psychokinesis. That much of that psychokinesis work went to Princeton University rather than Stanford Research Institute back in the 70s. And there was always this, concept of manipulation or the ability to make someone do something else. Remember the chess game, was it with Karpov or something? Was that the Russian's name? There was an accusation that there was mind control being used. Yeah. You remember that story?
Yeah, sure do.
So there was a concept of, is there an ability to do this? Can these people that seemingly describe things at distant locations or can bend metal or alter random number generators, could they in some way be used to affect the behavior of human beings or stop a rabbit's heart or all these strange suppositions? So many of those things were examined and looked into, and as the years passed, eventually there was a defector that came out from behind the Iron Curtain who had worked in all these labs and could verify the research being done and the results that were coming out of there.
Were the experiments successfully repeated?
The ones for distant viewing or remote viewing, as it came to be called, were successfully repeated, although it was an interesting story. And Dr. Puthoff, originally working with Ingo Swann, they were trying to have him describe objects hidden in boxes, and then they would open the object and match his descriptions, see how closely he was able to describe. And the joke is that with Ingo's many invitations to go home, meaning that he was sort of an honorary guy and said, this is the stupidest experiment I've ever seen in my life. If I want to know what's in that box, I'll just reach over and open the box. He says, this is trivial nonsense that you're doing. And of course the scientists are all like, trivial? Well, we're scientists. We're doing this in a controlled fashion and so forth. And so he says, see that big world map you have on the wall there? He said, give me the coordinates of any place on there and I'll describe what's there. And of course the scientists didn't believe him. Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff were like, well, okay, but first tell us what's inside this little box over here, kind of a thing. And so eventually, sort of placating themselves, they said, okay, we have some hidden coordinates for you. You're in a blank room and describe what's so many degrees north, so many degrees west. And he gave a pretty good description of a mountain area with buildings in a valley and so forth. And they're like, well, that's interesting. That was a good guess you gave. So they repeated this many times, and then eventually they asked their sponsor, the CIA, to begin to provide some coordinates of interesting locations, so that the scientists themselves didn't invent this. The CIA, the people that were paying for the research, would provide coordinates. And that's what led into the idea of this being not just verifying the research that had been done around the world, but actually using it in an operational sense.
Now, when somebody is remote viewing, can they remote view into the future as well as into the past, or is it just in real time, present real time?
When from standing in the shoes of a remote viewer,
Right.
time doesn't matter. The remote viewer themselves doesn't have a analytical understanding of time. They're just reporting their perceptions. So the trick becomes targeting them or assigning their intent towards what perception. The easy answer to your question is they can go anywhere in time. But I needed to say, when you're in the shoes of the remote viewer, you can't answer the same way. It's the fact that time, as we think of it as past and future, just doesn't matter.
What are the mechanics of remote viewing?
It seems to be a ability to focus one's intention in we don't want to say a specialized altered state of consciousness because that's getting too spooky, but it has to do with an ability to relax, focus one's intention, and the ability to describe the perceptions you're having without attaching meaning, or what we call in the business analytical overlay. If in your head you're asking questions, gee, I wonder what that is. Oh, what would that be? That's not going to produce successful remote viewing results. You have to report out what you're perceiving unattached to the meaning of what those things are. That's the job of an analyst, to put things together.
How many remote viewing missions did you take place in during your time with the intelligence agencies?
Thousands. I mean, with one famous remote viewer, Joe McMoneagle, I have done more than 1,000 remote viewings with him alone. And over the years, I probably worked with 20 different remote viewers. So a lot of them.
You know, here we've got the United States government still looking for Osama bin Laden. Why don't they just ask yourself and other professional remote viewers to find him?
Well, there's, again, probably 10 answers to that. There's an assumption that we don't know where Osama is. So is it better to have him alive than to have him martyred and become a symbol for his kind? Another answer, whole other answer, forget I ever said that, a whole other answer is, if I describe where he is now, I might say a dark, smoke-filled cave with soot on the ceiling, and I smelled
You're describing all of the caves in that part of the world.
Right. So it isn't very helpful in saying, well, where is he?
All right, stand by. Skip, you and I have to take
Sure.
a commercial break at the bottom of the hour with the news. Skip Atwater is our special guest. He is the research director at the Monroe Institute. Their website is www.monroeinstitute.org. I'll be back with Skip Atwater on the other side of this commercial break as the X Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
I'm looking through you. You're not the same. Your lips are moving. I cannot hear. Your voice is soothing.
You're listening to the X-Zone Radio Show, live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network, X-Zone Broadcast Network, UK High Definition Radio,
Euro High Definition Radio,
and Star Cable. Our toll-free telephone number worldwide is 1-800-610-7035.
Our email address, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com.
On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com,
And our website,
www.xzoneradiotv.com.
It's all been done. The look of love is in your eyes. A look your smile can't disguise. The look of love, it's saying so much more than just words could ever say.
Exonation, Skip Atwater is our special guest. We're talking about remote viewing. And Skip is the research director at the Monroe Institute. Their website is www.monroeinstitute.org. And Skip was a special agent with the U.S. Army counterintelligence agents, and he was, he played a key role in the remote viewing intelligence program, now known to the world by the code name Stargate. I would imagine that people in general, Skip, have a total misconception of how people remote view. I mean, how the professionals like yourself and other members actually do the remote viewing. And I was wondering if you could take us through the basic steps that a remote viewer would remote view.
Sure. There's lots of popular movies and TV shows that dramatize the activity for purposes of entertainment.
You mean you didn't make goats fall over?
It's not as strange or different that people would think. First of all, there are probably a half a dozen techniques that people use in terms of the way in which they describe the information, meaning the way they write it down on a piece of paper, a certain series of questions that they always attempt to answer. But in general terms, there is a period of time when you sit or lay down in a very quiet place, and you might have someone that works with you that asks you questions during the process, or you might work alone with a piece of paper or some sort of a designator of what you are to describe. Remember that in remote viewing, I said it was a scientific protocol-driven process. So you don't come up in your sit down today and say, oh, I'm going to remote view who's at McDonald's for breakfast. The problem with that is that it fills your mind up, you personally, your mind up with every time you've ever been to McDonald's and every person that you've ever seen in there. So this idea of self-targeting isn't as successful as one might think, and it's also referred to as front-loading. In other words, if I was to say to you, okay, today we're going to be remote viewing McDonald's. Are you ready? Now describe, and that's called front-loading. It's much better if you have no foreknowledge whatsoever of what you're expected to perceive, that if the targeting is what's called blind to you. So it can be a set of geographic coordinates. It can be, say, a sealed envelope, and in this envelope is a picture of someone, and we need you to describe that person, their state of health, and their location. And you focus and concentrate on, that's my task at hand. I need to describe this information they need. And then you turn inward to a mental plane, a mental slate perhaps in your own mind. People experience it differently. and simply wait for information to come. And you might have a perception of a tree. And so you write down or draw on your paper a tree. But you have to discipline yourself to say, oh, a tree, yeah, it must be a forest. Oh, look, there's a forest and there's grass here. You cannot be asking yourself analytical questions about what is the meaning of the tree. You just simply wait for the next piece of information to come in. Interestingly enough, over the 4 decades that this has been going on, it turns out that many of those mental perceptions that percolate into consciousness without being attached to some sort of analytical signature are capable of being validated as being ground truth pertaining to a particular location or a particular activity, as though mentally we have access to this information. But if we don't pay attention to it, like right now I'm paying attention to talking to you on the phone, I'm not paying attention to these things I might come to know had I paid attention to something else.
Is it very hard for someone to learn how to be a remote viewer?
Again, I've been in this business such a long time, there are always multiple answers to every question.
All right, give me your top 3 answers.
Okay. One approach is you can't possibly learn to do remote viewing. It's a natural talent. So that does away with that. Another answer is that yes, you can learn, and there are different techniques that you may be more drawn to, more successful. They teach a technique called controlled remote viewing. There's a technique of meditative remote viewing. There's techniques using NLP concepts in remote viewing. You need to find out what kind of a person are you, what kind of a thinker are you, how do you process the world around you, and find a particular technique that works for you. It certainly is not difficult to set a novice down, give them a 5-minute briefing, and then target them on something. They have a lot of beginner's luck of finding out, oh my goodness, I can do this. I never knew what those images in my head were, but now I see they can actually pertain to something. And you go from that into building up under general learning theory a increasing skill level, learning about not jumping to conclusions, not adding things to your perceptions to display only the facts of the things you perceive. So it does appear in this argument to be a learnable skill, just like you might learn to play the violin or the piano or to learn to dance.
If a person was a member of the military, would they be a better candidate to learn remote viewing since they have been trained how to pay strict attention to orders and to concentrate and to focus?
That's a really good question. When I, in 1977, when I first asked Dr. Putoff, how do you choose a remote viewer, he was looking at me like, oh man, you guys are going to get a bunch of special forces snake eater people. And so finally he said, well, listen, we have sort of 6 criteria, and I can't remember them all right now, but they're certainly in my book. You need to have people that have a good reputation in your office. They're the guy you go to get the job done. You need to have a person who is what we might call a global thinker, a person who is willing to take in, to inflow a whole lot of data. Before, not someone who is quick to snap decisions, but someone who wants to absorb a lot of data, always find out more information before they come to any kind of a conclusion. So we looked around when we first interviewed in the military community. We looked around for people like this, people that had this kind of approach to life, dependable people that, who's the guy, you go into an office and there's 40 people working there and you ask the boss, who's the guy you go to when you want to be sure this job is done? And they say, oh, Mary over there, Lieutenant Mary Fitzgerald, she gets the job done every single time. And so, that's the first thing. Well, has Mary ever thought about this, or has Mary ever thought about that? So it's an interesting process, and there does seem to be a profile, but really the only way you can find out for sure is to try it for yourself. Mm-hmm. And one of those things you ask about, can you learn to do remote viewing? There is another concept of natural talent that says 0.1% of the population can have a specific talent. A person who has that artistic talent, a person who is the athlete, a person who is a musician. We sort of divide up our population, and 0.1% seem to gravitate to those expert people. What that means is, in remote viewing, 0.1% of Americans, there are 300 million people, so 0.1% is 30,000 people. So there ought to be 30,000 really good remote viewers someplace. We just don't know where they are. And what about the piano players? Well, if you didn't get lucky as a kid and got piano lessons, or in junior high learned to play the violin, you might have that talent inside you, but you just don't know until you try.
Does a person's IQ have an effect on their ability to remote view?
I think people with very high IQs get wrapped up in our educational system. And much of, this is an interesting thing to say, much of remote viewing is learning to unlearn or undo the habits that are encouraged by our current academic environment. When we grow up as children, we're, your parents put a ball in front of you and they have you look at it and they say, ball, it's a ball. Look, you can play with it. Mm-hmm. And you're rewarded. The minute you say the word ball, everybody's, oh, so thrilled. Look, he said the word ball. And this continues to be a way in which we are educated in our Western modern society. Now, in remote viewing, you are trained not to say the word ball. You are to describe the raw perceptions. You sort of say soft, round, lightweight. They don't want you to jump to the word ball because that is too much of a conclusion about the raw perceptions you're having. So, yes, I think intellect helps. You certainly have to have an average or slightly above average. They say average intelligence is about 100, so something 100, 120, 130s, but when you get up into the 150, 160 range, it may be that you're latched into the academic reward system too much. Never had the opportunity to examine that scientifically.
Do men make better remote viewers than women, or do women make better remote viewers? And does age have anything to do with the quality of the remote viewing success ratio? Sure.
There is some, I don't think there's any difference between men and women. It has more to do with the life they lead. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you have a richness of experience and a richness of vocabulary, you're simply able to express yourself better. So that would mean that if you're 12 years old, you're not going and haven't done a whole lot of life and have a huge vocabulary, you're just not going to be able to describe and experience that's happening in your head. So I don't think there's a difference between men and women. There is a certain maturity of life that would be required, mm-hmm. but I have not ever dealt with anybody that age was not a problem. Obviously, if they had dementia, that wouldn't work. They have trouble dealing with the physical world, sure. Let alone the things that are coming into their head.
Tell me, Skip, would or could astral projection be used to enhance the abilities of remote viewers?
Yeah, that's a very commonly asked question and a very good one, because astral projection has a reputation for being able to see very crisp and clearly, and it's as vivid or more vivid than the eye seen reality, the EYE seen reality. There's some interesting concepts there. People who have experienced a great amount of experience in both dimensions, in both remote viewing and in out-of-body or astral projection, say there are differences between the two and limitations and advantages. When you are having an out-of-body experience or an astral projection, there is the sense of prepositional orientation and action-verb, meaning you perceive yourself to have to move up, down, left, right, through the wall, through the door, to go from one place to another, and you have the sense that you in your supposed astral body must make those actions. In remote viewing, that's not the case. In remote viewing, it's a pure information transfer. There's no such thing as, if I'm going to describe the outside the building, I have to move outside the building. That just isn't in the equation of remote viewing, just like time isn't in the equation.
Skip, you and I have to take a commercial break. We'll be right back. Exonation's Skip Atwater is our special guest. He is the research director at the Monroe Institute, www.monroeinstitute.org. We'll be back on the other side of this brief break. Don't go away.
Love is but a song we sing, feels the way we die. You can make the mountains ring, or make the angels cry.
And welcome back, everyone. Skip Atwater is our special guest this hour. He's the Director of Research at the Monroe Institute. If you'd like to get more information about Skip, he can be found at www.monroeinstitute.org/Skip Atwater. That's www.monroeinstitute.org/Skip Atwater. First of all, Skip, I want to thank you ever so much for joining us. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. Where do you see remote viewing in the future, and why did the government and intelligence agencies drop remote viewing?
Well, again, that's a very interesting supposition that they drop remote viewing. When I was working with the government, I knew that there was more than one remote viewing program going on simultaneously, and the one known as Stargate that came out of Stanford Research Institute was the one that was declassified in 1995, and then there were some private contractors that went on to do some other things. For example, Dr. Ed May and Joe McMoneagle have actually traveled to the Soviet Union and met the remote viewing team in Russia, since everybody's all handshakes and friendly, take a Russian to lunchtime. So it was a very interesting change in perspective. But I would not bet a nickel that our intelligence services don't today use remote viewing.
What do you think the next step in evolution of remote viewing is going to be?
Well, I think that there is now focus and turn to the more talented people. There's been an interesting history over the past several decades of we have very special talented people to moving for 2 decades into, no, everybody can do it. Oh, it's so wonderful. We're all just wonderful. We can all do this. To finding out we have 2 decades of lost research on those people who seem to do this quite naturally without any special training and do it very well. So finding out the uniqueness of this human behavior, there are rumors that Chinese children are tested early and then separated off into special schools to develop these enhanced human abilities, these talents that people have. So I think that's probably where the future lies, in the recognition that we don't know everything there is to know about this, and we need to do more study and come to a better understanding of those people who express this as a natural talent.
Skip, I want to thank you once again for joining us. Great talking to you. I hope we have the pleasure of having you back here in the X Zone in the future.
Be glad to.
Take care, sir. Exonation, Skip Atwater, the Director of Research at the Monroe Institute, www.monroeinstitute.org/Skip Atwater. Well, that's it for tonight. I'd like to thank all my guests tonight and all the stations around the world who carry the X Zone. And I'd like to thank you, the X Zone Nation, for allowing us to be part of your day, your night, no matter where you are on this beautiful blue planet of ours. So until tomorrow night, be kind to each other, love your children, and always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night now.
I know